What are the pros and cons of selling a house as is? What you should know. We're taking a closer look to explore whether selling a home as is all that it's cracked up to be on this episode, so stay tuned. Welcome back. My name is Dale Corpus. I'm a realtor in the Tri-Valley area in the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area, and I post videos every Friday about all things real estate. When it comes to selling your home, a lot of people give consideration to how they want to sell their home. Do they want to do a pre-listing home inspection and get the repairs done first, which is always wise, but what happens on the flip side that if a seller is in a financial distress position, or if they don't have time because they're getting ready to go on a job relocation or move out of state? And they think to themselves, what about selling a home as is? There are certainly times that selling a home as is will make sense. And it really depends on the condition of your property, your situation, and the story behind why you're selling your home. Real estate is so much more than a simple transaction. It's really about what's important to you, why you're selling your home, and then assessing it and putting it in perspective in the home selling process to ensure that we can help you achieve the goal that you have in mind. And when it comes to selling as is, sometimes it sounds really sexy and you hear it out there and you're thinking, you know what, that actually sounds really fun and I don't want to do repairs. So let's get real about that. And let's first identify what it means to sell a home as is. Perhaps one of the best definitions for selling a home as is would be to sell a home as is means that you're selling the property in its current state with an understanding that no repairs will be made and that the home will come with all of its current faults and issues. The as is term is actually a legal definition, and the buyer probably has to sign some paperwork acknowledging that he or she understands they are accepting the property in its current as-is condition with no repairs, whether it's good or bad or indifferent. It's all on them moving forward. So now that you know what selling a home as is means, let's take a look at what selling a home as is does not mean. Unfortunately, a lot of sellers think that they're completely off the hook whenever they say, hey, I'm gonna sell the home as is. And depending on the state and where you live, you may have customs in your state and legal requirements to provide what's called a seller's property questionnaire or a transfer disclosure statement, or it may be called something else in your state. It's all the same. It would be a statement of disclosure from you, the seller, disclosing any defects about the property that you may have a knowledge of since the time that you've owned that property. And that alone means that you still need to provide a full disclosure. So it's very, very important to understand that when you sell a home as is, you still need to go through the appropriate course of making your full disclosures. We don't want a buyer to be blind anyways. We want them to know what they're buying whenever they're buying a home as is. There's so many different reasons that go into why people choose to make this decision, but it's extremely important for you to understand what your obligations are as a seller moving forward. And just because you sell as is doesn't take you off the hook completely. And as a side note here, as a trusted real estate advisor, we do have a duty and obligation for this consumer that we represent. Whether it's the buyer or the seller, you're going to have a buyer as agent that's going to go out there representing a buyer to purchase your home. That buyer's agent has a fiduciary duty to take their client to make sure that they are disclosing anything that they observe as a real estate practitioner. There should be reasonably discerned from a real estate practitioner's point of view, and some of these items could include evidence of a structural defect, like a major crack in the foundation, the appearance of mold in the house, and termite damage, the roof has leaks, or any other prior damage, maybe such as water intrusion that may have caused damage as well. The fifth thing that I, as a real estate agent, would need to disclose if it came to their knowledge are there any known plumbing or electrical issues, any significant external issues, such as noxious noise level and known legal issues, such as a cloud on title or the property is in a short sale situation. In other words, it has liens against the property, has a judgment against the property, it's pending litigation. Any of these things need to be disclosed by the real estate agent to the prospective buyer. And the last one here are any other material defects that can be reasonably observed. It is extremely important to note that we as real estate practitioners are not home inspectors, mold inspectors, foundation specialists, or any other kind of inspector. That being said, we do have an obligation and a duty to the clients that we represent to make full disclosure. Let's say that you have a buyer's agent that was talking to the listing agent about the property, and the listing agent says, hey, this was being sold as is. If I was representing a buyer, I would say, okay, great. Thank you for that information. Why is the seller selling the home as is? Is there an issue with the property? Is there a defect with the property? If so, what is it? Well, the listing agent would then have an obligation to be truthful and honest with me as a buyer's agent. And once I came into knowledge of that information, then it would be my duty to go back to my buying client and say, hey, I found out some more information for why the seller is selling the home as is. In conversation with the listing agent earlier on today, they assured me that there is a structural defect on the property, or they shared with me that there appears to be the presence of mold growing inside the home. If you choose to move forward with this property, please know these facts are going into the situation, and I strongly encourage you to have a home inspection performed. And since the listing agent is mentioning there may be the appearance of mold in the house, then please, you may want to also consider having a mold inspection done if you choose to move forward with this property. So any knowledge that I come into, whether it's directly from the listing agent, either it's something that I heard from the seller is happens to be out on the property and I was there over with the client, and if they're saying things about the property, I need to be making full disclosure to my clients as a fiduciary duty. Real estate agents are really interesting in that regards, where we do have fiduciary duties to our clients. It could be obedient, to be loyal, to provide full disclosure, to maintain their confidence, to give them full accounting and what's called reasonable skill and care. And the aspect that we're talking about now, not only does it fall underneath loyalty, disclosure, it also falls underneath reasonable skill and care to share the information that we as a real estate practitioner may be able to observe and bring that information and bring it to light perspective to the buyer. So just because you're selling home as is doesn't take you completely off the hook, nor does it negate your responsibilities as a home seller or the disclosures that you need to be making pursuant to your state and local laws that govern real estate in your area. In specific, there are 5 cons that you want to consider when selling a home as is. The first one, right off the bat, a buyer is going to perceive your home as there's something wrong with it. When a buyer perceives there's something wrong with your home, what does that mean? It already means that they're probably thinking about dropping your price pretty hard, and they're trying to figure out exactly what it is because they are uncertain whether they wish to take on the headache that is your home, or if it'll be their dream home they hope it to be. The second thing is to realize that buyers may lowball your price, and we're not talking about small lowballing here. If they are selling your home as is, it's highly likely that a buyer and their buyer's agent are going to perform a comparative market analysis on your property. And if you're trying to sell your home at fair market value, please be prepared for the low ball offer. And that's probably coming in 10 to 15%, if not more, depending on the condition of your property, on your house that you're trying to sell as is. It is common that when sellers choose to sell a home as is, they're selling for less than the fair market value. The third thing is to be prepared that you're a listing agent and you are going to have to work extremely hard to just demonstrate why your property should be selling for fair market value or at least a higher price than the initial lowball offer you may receive. The fourth con is to be prepared for fewer buyers going into your home. A lot of home buyers aren't at the mindset to say, hey, you know what? I love to buy a home as is because I want to get down and dirty and I want to do all the renovation now. In fact, many home buyers would prefer something much more turnkey, move-in ready at least, for a home that has strong bones to the house. So if the bones in your house are broken, it already presents an issue. So it's just a matter of updating, refreshing, doing a little painting. Okay, perhaps they would be open-minded to that. A lot of people would be in that case. And as a home buyer, if it just needs to be updated, but if there's something really wrong with the house or there's just some things about it that just don't sit well, that's why you're going to have fewer showings, because a lot of people are going to say, I don't know what the seller is trying to hide. Whether you're trying to hide anything or not is not the point here. What is the point is the perception of what it means to sell a home as is, just as you as a seller have a perception before we started having this conversation on today about what it means to sell a home as is. So is true of a home buyer that has already formed their own opinion and thought process about why a seller would sell a home as is. In that case, a lot of them are already going to be approaching the property with skepticism. In many cases, buyers are simply going to think that the seller is trying to hide something. The fifth con to realize and really come to terms with between you, your listing agent, and yourself is the fact that when you sell a home as is, if you're accepting different finance types, let's say a VA loan, FHA loan, these are federally insured loans, and even with a conventional loan, there are going to be certain requirements that must be met for our health and safety conditions pursuant to the lending type that a buyer has. Where do you think I'm going with this? Obviously, our buyer is gonna have to do a home appraisal. If the appraiser goes into the home and notes certain health and safety items are defunct with the property, you may not be able to sell the home with that specific loan type. So this is more on your selling strategy session conversation that you need to have with your listing agent to know exactly which one of these loan programs may be a little more flexible or forgiving depending on what the condition is of your home. If your house presents health and safety issues, an appraiser will call it out and you will be expected to fix it if you wish to move forward with that offer. Okay, so now that we reviewed the cons, let's take a look at some of the pros of why you might want to consider selling your home as is. The first one is a very real reality. Maybe you're just simply not in a financial position to make the repairs. Maybe it's a situation where you're in a little bit of distress yourself or economically aren't as healthy as you once were, and now you're trying to sell a property. You know, you don't have the money to make the repairs, even if you really, really wanted. It's more of a forgiving selling as is situation at that point and trying to figure out how to put a deal together that's most amenable to both you and the prospective home buyer, with full disclosure being made and full and open, honest conversations taking place during the negotiation process to figure that out. So if you really are financially cash strapped, maybe selling as is a good idea to avoid the vast majority of repairs that may be required. The second thing is just the stress of the home selling process. There are some people that are so anxiety prone that anytime there's a change in their life, it really, really upsets their mental, emotional, psychological state. And if selling a home is one of those things, it's a big life change for any of us. And let's just be honest and clear about it. At the same time, there are some people that can actually produce panic attacks. So in their regards, hey, I don't like confrontation. Consider that person that just does not like confrontation whatsoever, or even the notion or perception of confrontation. They don't like to be in disagreement with everybody. They prefer to be in harmony. And I'm sure somebody comes to mind right now. We all know people that are like this. Sometimes people are timid and they just don't want the stress and the hassle of selling the house in that case, and they may be looking to sell their home as is because they just don't want to have to put themselves in a position that could cause them a panic attack. The third pro is if you are in a financial distress position, I mean a seriously distressed position, where perhaps you missed your mortgage payments and you received a notice of default that the bank intends to foreclose on your house, and you're trying to sell it before the foreclosure proceeding kicks off and all the way, and you get evicted from your house. If that's the case, you might be saying, hey, I'm selling as is. You're dropping the price down to what is comfortable and makes sense to you, that you can pay obviously the remaining balance on your mortgage and get out from underneath that property, but you don't have a lot of money to make any kind of repairs to the property if they come up. So in that position, again, it's one of those situations that it's got to make sense. Takes full disclosure, and going back to what we discussed earlier, that is disclosure if you are delinquent on your payments. That is disclosure that has to be made that could be potentially moving forward through the foreclosure process. A buyer has to be made aware of that because it changes the transaction type itself, the documentation required, that changes a lot of different things to do with how we perceive. Now, just to give you a heads up, I have worked with sellers in real estate practice here in the San Francisco Bay Area that were in just that same situation where they had missed 2 mortgage payments. And I shared with them, when you miss a total of 3 mortgage payments, the bank is going to issue a notice of default. I said, all of a sudden you're going they're going to come to your house one day and there's going to be a blue tape around a piece of paper that lets you know that the bank is serving you a notice of default and breach. And what they intend to do now is sell your property to recuperate their loss. And they said, Dale, how can I avoid that? I say, the first thing that we can do together is talk about selling the house, figure out the numbers on this thing, and see what's going to make sense for you moving forward. We were able to pull it off, and lo and behold, the notice of default foreclosure proceedings were about to kick off one day before we closed. So that got hit with some fees from the bank at that end. And at the end of the day, though, we're able to discharge that property, take the remaining balance of equity that was due to them, and go on and start their life afresh. So this is a very real example of things that happen across the United States every day with people. You just need to be prepared. You just need to know what the upsides are and the downsides are so that you as well can be informed with your decision that's right for you. If you're always honest, it'll always keep us on the right path, and it'll help others know what's going on and make them comfortable moving forward with us to help us all what we wanted to do on day one, which is achieve your goal to get your home sold, and achieving them by helping them buy their new home. The fourth thing is to realize that a buyer is more than likely going to still have a home inspection performed. It was always wise for a home buyer to have a home inspection performed, even if it's like their 50th home. It's extremely wise to have a home inspector go in with their professional eyes and look at all the different components of the house, check it out, and report it back to the buyer. So you, as a seller, even though you're selling as is, your home will still need to be made available for a home inspector to go in if the buyer chooses to have a general home inspection or any other home inspection done on the property. And that's part of their buyer due diligence. They're entitled this as a right, and they need to have the opportunity. So you still need to open up your home to that, and you may still be asked to make certain repairs, going back to what happens if that appraiser goes out and identifies any health and safety concerns, and you choose an offer with a certain type of financing where those repairs must be made. Otherwise, a lender won't fund the home loan. So the fifth thing to understand what the middle ground, what the compromise is really like. If it's a situation that you're thinking to yourself, hey, I really want to sell as is because I don't want to make repairs. But at the end of the day, I really am open-minded towards maybe more reasonable repairs. I just don't want to get into all that nitpicky stuff like there might be a crack in the stucco or there's a crack in the brick or in the exterior facade. And then the buyer's like, wow, I want that fixed even though it's a little hairline crack. Look, I get that. I understand. I have a lot of conversations with various sellers in the San Francisco Bay Area where that's when they first approach me and they say, Dale, I want to sell home as is. And I asked them, tell me why you want to do that and what is your understanding of it? And they ultimately normally is circle back and then just say, I just don't want to be asked for reasonable inspection requests. And that makes a lot of sense. And I could certainly appreciate that. So I just share with them the realities of how it works in real estate practice and just in the overall process. And I observed over the last 13 years of representing families. So I just share with them what it really means in real estate practice and how this plays out. I say, look, if a buyer makes a repair request, the operative term there is the word request. Sort of anything that an appraiser says that must be done pursuant to specific lending types that the buyer is using. Those things have to be done whether the appraiser says anything else from the result of a home inspection when the buyer makes a repair request. It's just a request. It doesn't have to be done. I said, I do believe it's the polite and right thing to do. And I believe that we pay it forward because when you sell your home, we're gonna help you get another one. And hopefully that seller has the same mindset to pay it forward as well. In other words, it is the polite, right thing to do, at least in my humble opinion as a person and as a professional, to make as many repairs as reasonable to make, because we want to give somebody the house that's gonna become their new home in the best condition possible so they can enjoy it and they can live in it, right? And the same thing that we would want a seller to do when we go buy our new home. This isn't kind of like a gotcha type of thing or screwing somebody over type of thing. Real estate has to be much more sensible than that. Real estate is much more than just a transaction. You have a story right now about why you're selling your house. A buyer has a story of how they got into a position that they're able to buy a home. If we do the right thing by each other, we make the world a better place, one person at a time, one smile a day, and every step that we take moving forward. And that's what I'd want you to consider depending on what your situation is. Now, it may or may not make sense given your financial position, but there is a balance. There's a balance to be made here. It's about finding the middle ground of what's reasonable and acceptable to you and prospective home buyers. Chatting it over with your respective trusted real estate advisors and finding that middle ground together to move forward. The sixth thing to do is to price your home appropriately. So if you decide that selling a home is right for you, then be prepared to price your home correctly based upon the renovations, the repairs, or anything that needs to be done to the home. So let's say that your home at fair market value condition is worth $1 million. And let's also say that you understand and know that it's going to take about $75,000 to bring that home up to fair market value. So if we already know the fair market value, your home should be $1 million. We know there's roughly $75,000 of renovation that are needed to the property. Where do you think your list price should be? Your list price should be right at $925,000, if not $900,000, and try to get a buyer to come in there that was willing to take on the project. But if you list at $925,000 and you make a disclosure about these improvements that need to be made to the property or the repairs that need to be made to the property that'll take up to $75,000, then there's always going to be a buyer in the market that says, hey, you know what? I'm going to take this off your hands. Here you go. So it's important to price appropriately if you're trying to get $1 million or more for the house. that you're selling as is and it needs that kind of work, then you're not going to get it and you're not going to be able to sell your home. Because unless you get open-minded to take a massively lowball offer at that time, that's just being honest. Look, I'm not trying to scare you. It's simply a matter of trying to prepare you with the realities of how real estate practice works. And I really hope that this has been very informative to you to better understand what selling a home as is means, what it doesn't mean, and some of the considerations given as far as pros and cons or concerns. If you found this helpful, do me a favor and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. You may also want to check out my past video on the pros and cons of a pre-listing home inspection, and the link to that video is at the top corner of the screen. Again, I'm Dale Corpus from eXp Realty in San Ramon, California. I help buyers and sellers throughout the Bay Area and the Tri-Valley, and I'll see you on my next video.